Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, December 5th, 2016, getting into the month here, a couple of days away from Pearl Harbor Day, heading up on Christmas, heading up on the Electoral College, all kinds of nonsense going on around that. We're going to get right into it. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, over the weekend, a couple of developments on this recount circus that's still going on here. Apparently over the weekend, Jill Stein dropped her lawsuit in state court to force a recount of the Pennsylvania vote. Then, all of a sudden, decides that she's going to file suit in federal court to force Pennsylvania to do the recount. The issue was $1 million bond Pennsylvania wanted Stein to post against the cost of the recount and litigation and the rest of it, and Jill Stein didn't want to do that. So she's gone to federal court to force Pennsylvania to do a recount and let the taxpayers pay for it. Which sort of makes you wonder, what is she doing with all the somewhere between $4 and $6 million that she got from her supporters for all of this nonsense to begin with. Now, apparently what's going on, and again, you need to understand, the recounts aren't going to change anything at all. They've magically found thousands of new votes for Hillary. Jim Stone is saying that his inside sources are saying that the Democrats in the recount effort are literally discarding Trump votes and filling out new forged votes for Hillary Clinton, and that's why there's that sudden change over there. They're trying to get within that half point to force a complete recount, and just all this nonsense. Now, what's going on here is they don't really care about the recount. And Jill Stein's comment about Americans deserve to know their election system is fair, well, why is she only targeting states where Trump won by narrow margins and ignoring states that Hillary won by even less margin, by slimmer margin? Especially since those states involve huge concentrations of illegal immigrants who were voting. This is very clearly an effort to steal the White House for Hillary Clinton, and the goal here in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan is not to force a recount, but to tangle them up like Florida 2000 in all kinds of legal proceedings, so they will not be allowed to send their electors to the Electoral College on December 19th, which is just 2 weeks away. And that means that Trump's lead over Hillary in the Electoral College will be slimmed way down, where it's only going to take a handful of Hillary's bribed, threatened, blackmailed electors to switch their votes from Trump to Hillary and steal the White House for Hillary Clinton. That's the game plan. That's what's going on out there. So apparently over in Michigan, late last night, a liberal judge, an Obama-appointed judge, ordered the Michigan recount to start as of noon today, even though there is no evidence of election fraud and, of course, no regard to the cost. They're just really out there. Now, some of the electors in Michigan and in Ohio have gone public, saying they're being deluged with emails urging them to cast their vote for Hillary Clinton, and they're saying they're going to stand firm. They're going to stand with the voters of their states. Now, probably this flood of emails are as phony as Hillary's votes. There are companies that do nothing but manufacture phony email campaigns or regular postal mail campaigns to fool members of Congress into thinking there's a huge grassroots support or opposition to something, and it's a complete fantasy. And making things even worse and even more obvious, Pennsylvania's Secretary of State has released the contact information for all of Pennsylvania's electors. Now, in the past, they've always named the electors and which county they represented. And all of a sudden, Democratic Secretary of State Pedro Cortez has released a list of all the state's electors, including their home addresses and phone numbers, so they can be harassed and threatened. It doesn't get more obvious than that. All right, let's take a quick phone call. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob, are you there?
Yes, I did, Steve.
Oh, there.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I've just had it with this. I actually saw the Stein interview with Chris Wallace, and she's talking about this. You know, it seems like in her world there's this outpouring of indignation all across the nation that everyone's calling for a recount in just those states that, of course, that Trump won. I don't know where this grassroots uproar is coming from. I don't know, but I just had it. This is a candidate, Stein, who was completely ignored by the corporate media, didn't participate in the debates, and then all of a sudden she comes out after the general election and she can tie up things like she's had. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean,
it's not as if it would make a difference.
That's exactly the point right there. She can't claim aggrieved status. There is nothing that a recount is going to do to change the fact that she basically came in, in a multi-way tie for last place. And therefore, she lacks standing. If Hillary wanted to put her name on this recount effort, she should have right from the beginning rather than use this cutout. But that's very obviously what's going on. Jill Stein is acting as a puppet for Hillary Clinton to try and overturn this election. And this is already worse than Florida 2000. And the American people were very upset about what Florida 2000 revealed about our election system and how crooked it is. And we were told they were going to fix all the problems. We were never going to have to go through this again. And here we're going through it again. Now, in 2000, it really was a close race. But, before Florida was settled, both Bush and Gore were very close, neck and neck on the electoral votes. That's why it all came down to Florida swinging it. But in the current case here, we have Donald Trump with 306 electoral votes against Hillary's 232. Clearly, that's a landslide. And they're trying to reverse it. They're trying to game the system to reverse it and steal the White House for Hillary Clinton. And they're risking a civil war if they try this stunt, if they keep this up. Let's take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're talking about this recount circus, how Jill Stein dropped their state lawsuit in Pennsylvania because they didn't want to pay the $1 million bond that was required for a recount. Now they've gone to federal court to order Pennsylvania to do a recount at the cost of the taxpayers. And again, the recounts aren't going to mean anything. The goal of Jill Stein and Hillary Clinton is to block Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan from taking part in the Electoral College, which will narrow Donald Trump's lead over Hillary Clinton to where just a handful of electors who've been threatened, bribed, blackmailed, whatever, to change their vote from Trump to Hillary can swing the election and give her the White House. Now, don't forget, though, there is a provision in the Constitution where if members of Congress do not think the Electoral College acted in good faith, they can override it. And we may wind up seeing that happen. I mean, but we're already being set up here. Even if Hillary fails and Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th, we're going to have 4 years of the Democrats screaming, he wasn't legitimate, he wasn't legitimate, he stole the election, he did this, he did that. I'm like you, I'm sick and tired of the whiners. I'm really ready to crate them all up and ship them to Siberia.
Absolutely. And Jill Stein, of course, she had to mention this. Later in the interview, she mentioned, I don't care about Hillary Clinton. This has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. But she did find time to mention that Hillary Clinton won more votes. She won the popular vote. She had to get that in there.
Yeah, but Hillary Clinton didn't win the popular vote when you subtract out all the illegal immigrants and dead people who voted.
I agree.
I mean, they can't really think the American people are going to buy this nonsense.
No, but Mike, where are we hear about all these votes that suddenly appeared in Detroit, and she was making the comparison with Toledo, but where are the Trump operatives? Does he have people on the ground?
Yes, he has his lawyers up there, and I don't think Trump is seeking media attention. His public posture is he's the winner. He won the election. He won the election by the rules everybody agreed to play with. His lawyers are on the ground in all of these 3 states trying to basically go on in and argue Jill Stein, whose name is on these legal complaints, does not have standing because a recount cannot change her personal outcome. She can't claim that she was cheated out of winning those state elections by election fraud. It's just not going to happen. And unfortunately, we keep getting all these Obama-appointed judges who are waiting on in. I thought judges were supposed to be assigned at random to these cases, but somehow or other, remember all those coin tosses during the Democratic primary that Hillary Clinton inevitably won every single one of them? It's starting to feel more like that again.
And Hillary Clinton's silence, it seems like she's disappeared. Her silence is sickening. It just speaks to the kind of person she is. Because all throughout the campaign, or at the end of that, after that third debate, she was condemning her, and the Democrats were condemning Trump for not admitting that he'd concede the election if he lost. And now her silence is deafening. It's just outrageous.
Well, we all know this is Hillary, and I think it's a mark of just how mentally deficient Hillary Clinton has become, that she actually appears to think the American people are believing that this is all Jill Stein and that Hillary's got nothing to do with it, even though Hillary Clinton's lawyers are up there with Jill Stein right now moving this along. And certainly somebody wrote those huge donations to Jill Stein's fund for the recount. Remember, somebody discovered that every hour on the hour, an automated pledge of $106,000 was being poured on in from some source. So, this probably coming from Soros. But it really is, they could start a civil war with this nonsense. They really could.
They could. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, as you know, we have had this curse of celebrities mouthing off about politics all over the place here. There was that embarrassment with Hamilton, the New York play. And the reality is that these are all actors. They're stars. That's what they study. That's what they work at. That's what they know. They're not experts on politics. Even if they play a politician in a TV show or a movie, they're not really up to speed on it. Playing a doctor in a TV show does not qualify you to actually take out somebody's appendix. And Mark Wahlberg, who I'm really getting a lot of respect from, he's come on out and he's said all these celebrities ought to shut up about politics. They're out of touch. They don't really know what they're talking about. And I discovered that when I was back working in Hollywood. Everybody there, they'll grab whatever soundbite was on the TV news last night, and that's their position today. No fact-checking. They just wanted to be fashionable. They wanted to be on board the fashionable political trend of the day. My position here, I got blacklisted out of Hollywood 22 years ago over the Vincent Foster affair, and studying politics, studying government, studying corporate media has been pretty much my full-time occupation ever since. So I'm in agreement with Mark Wahlberg. All these celebrities out there saying all these horrible things are going to happen, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just out there feeding lines, hoping that you are still gullible enough to believe that because they're a celebrity, somehow they are endowed with greater wisdom and vision than ordinary humans. And no, take it from me, they are not. And basically, Wahlberg is saying that the fact that Trump did win the election should send a message to Hollywood celebrities that people aren't listening to them anymore in terms of politics. And, people may buy the music CD or watch the movie and the TV show, but the Hollywood celebrities don't put food on Americans' tables. They don't pay the bills. Wahlberg says a lot of Hollywood is living in a bubble, and he's absolutely right about that. They have their own little fantasy world. All righty, let's see. Apparently, Donald Trump has tapped Ben Carson as Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I got to tell you, I definitely disagree on this one, given that Carson appears to be a fake in much of his life and much of what he's done here. Okay, let's take a few more phone calls. Ken in Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Well, if we're talking about being consistent and the popular vote was the one that the standard that we were supposed to be going on, wouldn't Bernie Sanders be the aggrieved party?
He certainly would. And, we had all these Democratic primaries where Bernie Sanders won the popular vote, and still somehow magically Hillary Clinton got all the delegates. You didn't hear her talking about the popular vote back then, did you? You didn't see her stand up and say, well, Bernie Sanders actually won the popular vote, so I'm going to give him some of my delegates. It didn't become an issue until she lost the electoral vote in the general election, which is how we run our general elections.
Well, that's what I'm saying is on the Republican side, we were consistent. The Electoral College in the primary, the preliminary, Donald Trump won, and he also won in the general, and they went with the standard of the Electoral College in the primary for the Democrats and the popular vote in the general.
Well, they say that now, but Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, both of them ran their campaigns not to win the popular vote, but to win electors. That's the way the rules are set up, and Hillary and her people are trying to change the rules ex post facto because they didn't get what they wanted. And they're making a mockery of the American system before the eyes of the world. They're causing tremendous damage to our public image around the world. We're supposed to stand for democracy and human rights and freedom, and here we are with Hillary Clinton acting like, a tin pot third world dictator. Or I should say gold pot. She's not a tin pot anything. She wants gold. She's a gold pot dictator.
Well, everybody in power is allowing her to do it. So it's not only her, she can only go so far. It's the judges and everybody else that are saying it's okay to do this. And, who's wearing the pants? Nobody.
Well, again, this election was always about the entrenched permanent ruling class establishment against the ordinary Americans. This last year's election was supposed to be Jeb Bush against Hillary Clinton, so it didn't matter what the voters decided. It would still be the narcocracy continuing in power. And Donald Trump, Jeb Bush just couldn't connect with the voters. Donald Trump got in there because the American people want a change. They want the current establishment out. The current establishment, and that includes not only the government, but the corporate media, the tops of the big corporations, including social media. They see themselves as literally fighting for their very survival, and therefore anything that they do to maintain their wealth, power, and control is justified in their minds. Constitution be gosh darned.
And that's why I'm talking to you, because I'm done with the corporate media.
Well, so is a lot of other people, and the corporate media viewership numbers, ratings are way down there. CNN's pulling fewer people than the Gardening Channel right now, and that's why they've mounted this war on the independent media. And James Corbett came out with this little video over the weekend where he said, you need to wake up and realize this is war. The establishment has declared war on anybody who is not going to go along with the official view of whatever. And they're going to do whatever they can to shut us down, set us up where we can be sued out of existence. There's this bill that just passed in Congress where the government can shut down Russian propaganda websites. But the description of what falls into the list includes anybody posting anything that questions official U.S. government policy because, after all, they're helping the Russians if they're if they're creating doubt in the minds of the American people that the corporate media and the government are not being fully truthful. That's going to help the Russians, and therefore we have a right to shut them down. It's a very broad brush. We're going through a repeat of the Nazi book burning. It's digital this time, but it's the exact same mindset. Anything that doesn't support the Nazi Party platform is going to be erased.
You aren't a little upset about this, are you?
Heck no.
Okay. Well, on a lighter note, is it snowing out there?
It is up on the tops of the volcanoes. They got 2 feet over the weekend. They're expecting another foot for the next storm that's coming on in here. And, you can go skiing on the Big Island in the morning and go surfing in the Pacific in the afternoon.
That's crazy because I was going to make a suggestion that we ship all the electric cars out there because of the volcanoes. We could use the hot water to generate power. You guys could run all electric cars out there. They tried geothermal.
They had some problems with it. I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Let's grab a few more phone calls and then get back to the news. Mike in Fort Lauderdale, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Sir, I'm as pumped up as you are. She did not win the popular vote. All the counties that Trump won were like, it was like 90% of the counties in the United States or greater, Trump won, hands down, by landslide. And then the counties that she won were the urban centers that had the illegal alien amnesty centers. I mean, this is ridiculous. And we need to, and I think your talent of like graphic artist talent, we need to put like a bullet point, little like screenshot up of all the things that they're going to say in the future that Trump didn't like win the election, and counter it with these bullet points saying, number one, you did not win the popular vote. These are the amount of counties in the United States that Trump won. These are the amount of counties she won. I'm right then and there. I think that we should start with that and then go on with the other incredibly good things that you and the other callers were saying.
Well, I mean, the main bullet point right now is to stay on that thing that Hillary did not win the popular vote, because illegal immigrants, non-citizens, are not allowed to vote. Both votefraud.org and truethevote.org have run their own studies looking at voter registration records, and they're saying at a minimum 3 million non-citizens voted. Those votes can't count. And there's another estimate that there may have been as many as 1.2 million dead votes. And the problem with our system is there's no way to check. It's set up so that you just have to rely on the corporate media and the government to tell you who won the election. But there's a real serious doubt here. This election system is set up to facilitate and conceal election fraud. It's not set up to be an honest election system, because the people in power don't want honest, fair elections, or they'd be out on the sidewalk by now.
Absolutely. But someone very eloquently put together the amount of counties, the numerical amount of counties throughout the United States, and showed on a graph how many counties that Trump won and how many counties that she won. Based on, and that's, without counting for the voting fraud and the things that we just spoke of.
Yeah, Donald Trump had better coverage of the nation than Vonage.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what it looks like. It looks like a cell phone coverage map.
Yeah, that's it. And it's solid.
One last thing in parting. Do you think we can get the word out, maybe through this program and the social media, where the politicians will pick up on this? Can we please do the purple ink thumb pad voting thing, so that, like they do in the Middle East and these other countries, so that people can't just keep showing up at the polls again and again and again?
Well, we could, but they won't. These people who are currently in power are in power because the election system can be rigged to keep them in power. They want it this way. They want it this way. If Hillary succeeds in stealing the White House, they will not allow anything to change about the current election system because it works for them. And you're just supposed to believe that the elections are honest and fair and trustworthy, and that, when the government goes back to abusing you, that somehow you voted for this, so you shouldn't complain.
Maybe we could start at the grassroots at the local election level and try to work our way up if we can. I know this is not really even a federal government anymore. It's a central government. It's nothing the founding forefathers wanted. So
no, it absolutely is not. But, if you look at some of the documentaries that Bev Harris produced about her trying to get inside these electronic voting machines, and you find out that even the local elections officials are just as corrupted, because they're hoping to make the leap from being the election commissioner to, on the town council, and from there to be the mayor, and then blah, 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 blah. They're all there to serve their own ambition. And there are very few people who are in this system. In fact, obviously, by definition, anybody who wants honest, fair elections is not going to get hired by these election companies. And it's been going on a long time. The computers just made it a lot more easy to steal elections, and a lot more opaque for those who want to try and do something about it. Now, it is very possible. It's very easy to have honest, trustworthy, and fair elections. And yes, that thing about the blue on the finger is a good way to go. But our current regime will never allow it to happen, because they perpetuate by stealing elections. And Hillary Clinton stole the nomination. She tried to steal the White House, didn't quite make it. Now she's trying to steal it again. And if she fails,
Mike, all the best.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to take a break here. And aloha, America, welcome back to the show. We're going to take a couple more phone calls, then we're going to get back to the news. There's a lot of breaking developments we need to get to today. And so we're going to go to Jeff in Texas. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Bonsoir, Mike. Real quick on Trey Gowdy and the Trump administration. Do you think Trump's going to make him CIA director, or will Jeff Sessions appoint him special prosecutor into the Clinton Mafia investigation?
Well, I'd like to see the latter one happen. You know, a lot of people were kind of hoping that Trey Gowdy would be considered for Attorney General. But in hindsight, if Trey Gowdy was Attorney General, Hillary Clinton and the foundation would shrink in importance to him because he'd have all these other issues that he's dealing with. And by leaving him right where he is right now, Trey Gowdy gets to continue putting a tremendous amount of focus on Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. And that's why official Washington is in a panic, because if anonymous sources are to be trusted on this, basically everybody in the upper reaches of Washington, D.C. was dipping into that Clinton Foundation. They're all dirty, and that's why they're all united to try and keep Donald Trump from that White House, because they're looking at serious jail time. As far as appointing Trey Gowdy a special prosecutor, I would love to see that happen. But I got to tell you this, something has to be done. We cannot have a country with a two-tiered justice system where ordinary people are held to the letter of the law and the elites are allowed to do whatever they want, just like the nobility back in the Middle Ages. We can't leave a country that corrupted for our children to inherit. Imagine what their lives are going to be. Look at what we've all suffered through. Multiply it by a factor of 10. That's what our children are going to grow up to be living under, unless we are able to hold some of these criminals to account. And I'm in agreement with Donald Trump. We're not out for revenge here, but we need to establish a deterrent to this behavior.
Yeah, I agree. There's got to be a fair law in the land. What do you think Trump's going to do with Trey Gowdy? You know he's coming onto the team. He's a secret weapon.
I don't know, and all I can say is time will solve that mystery.
Okay, man.
Whoops. We just lost our connection again. And, wow, what happened? Okay. And we're back here again. I don't know why we're having so much trouble with our Skype connection here. All right, so we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to get back to the news here. Alex in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I watched some YouTube this weekend, and I see where there's a YouTuber that has basically matched the Podesta brothers to the missing little girl in Portugal.
Okay, hang on. Before you go any further, all right, this whole Pizzagate thing is a setup. The entire thing is built on a bunch of assumptions as to what words in Podesta's email represent code words that mean blah, blah, blah. None of it has any substantiation. I think Pizzagate is a hoax. It's a poison the well hoax so they can plant it on the independent media, so the corporate media can say, well, look, Pizzagate was a complete fake, so you can't trust anything the independent media says about anything. And that's why I have avoided going there, and I don't want to get in there. Apparently lawsuits are getting ready to fly. They had what appears to be a staged shooting at the pizza parlor, which would open the door for the owner of the pizza parlor to sue everybody who carried this Pizzagate story and drive them out of business. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. All right. So now then, Donald Trump is apparently widening his search for a new Secretary of State. Apparently he is not happy with Mitt Romney. Good. And not with Rudy Giuliani, which a lot of people were opposed to because of his, participation in the 9/11 hoax. And so Trump is starting to look at other possibilities out there. I think Trump maybe ought to look at Ron Paul or even Cynthia McKinney. And I still think Tulsi Gabbard would make a great Secretary of State. Now, Donald Trump has put together what is called the President's Strategic and Policy Forum. And he has pointedly left out the internet oligarchs. This policy forum that he's setting up is to determine communication and media policy for his administration. And Eric Schmidt wasn't invited, Larry Page wasn't invited, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. And again, this is another sign that Donald Trump has come to understand the corporate media and the corporate social media were not on his side during the election, and they're going to be opposed to him for the next 4 to 8 years. So he's going to bypass them. Now, the Clinton campaign manager is out there accusing Breitbart of peddling false news, and went on out there and say, headlines that are shocking and insulting shouldn't be part of our public discourse. They're out there now saying, we will decide what the public is allowed to talk about. So what part of Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances are you people not getting? You don't get to decide what we're going to talk about out here in the heartland. You don't have that authority. You do not have that right. We'll decide what we're going to talk about. We're grown-ups. We're big people. We can figure things out for ourselves. Now, the recently passed Counterintelligence Act has a provision that creates a committee to counter active measures by the Russian Federation to exert covert influence over peoples and governments, as is usual with anything in the government, excessively obfuscated and blurry. But basically what it says is the government is getting ready to try and create a legal justification to shut down independent media websites that are perceived as aiding Russia. And by that, it doesn't mean websites that get money from Russia, who are directly communicating with Russia. Merely casting doubt on the credibility and trustworthiness of the U.S. government and the corporate media is deemed to be assisting Russia. And they've gone back to this old Cold War requirement. Section 502 limits Russian and only Russian diplomats in the United States to traveling no more than 25 miles from their offices. It's kind of a way to give Putin the finger here. Story coming out of NewYorker.com, the propaganda about Russian propaganda. And basically, they're taking prop or not's methodology, if one even exists, to task. And they're out there saying there is no foundation for smearing websites like WhatReallyHappened.com as agents of Russia. We are engaged in the lawful exercise of our First Amendment right to freedom of speech. The reason we have that First Amendment was so that American citizens could justly criticize the government without fear of reprisals, revenge, or repercussions. And that's under attack right now. We've seen how the Second Amendment's been under attack, the Fourth Amendment is under attack. Now they're going after that First Amendment. So apparently, telling the truth about anything is now Russian subversion. The commies are coming to get you. All right, let's grab a couple of quick phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, this Russian propaganda has nothing to do with Russia. This is about the globalists trying to keep you silent. It's a worldwide small group. We talked about this. Everybody knows this. For people who don't, it's a small group of people who don't want to give up power. If you look at Italy, you look at Austria, I feel bad for the Austrian people. They went after him the same way. Extreme right, Islamophobe. It's the same playbook. That's where you can see it's all the same playbook by these people. They have nothing else to offer. It's the same playbook to divert people. You know?
Yes.
And it's a these people are sick, Mike. I mean, it's a cult. You look at the people crying when Hillary lost. even overseas. It's a cult, neoliberal, globalist cult. That's what it is, Mike.
That's how it operates lower down. I mean, the leaders don't believe in the cult here. I mean, any more than David Miscavige actually believes in Xenu or anything. Faith is for the masses. It hinders the clergy. But you're absolutely right. This is the entrenched oligarchical establishment fighting for its survival. They're feeling under threat right now. They've lost control of the minds of the population. We're thinking for ourselves. We're asking questions. We're skeptical. All of these are anathema to a government that only knows how to rule through lies, fraud, and deception.
Well, yeah, people got to realize the Clinton Foundation is a global. It's not just about here.
Oh, yeah.
Saudi Arabia, Britain, France, Germany. It's the same small group of people that want to give up power. I know people can't fathom that, like a new world order, one world government, but this is actually what these people want, is no borders, open borders, has nothing to do with free trade. It's a control mechanism. People need to realize that. It goes through history like this.
Well, what they want is for us to have absolutely no choice in the living of our lives, and tearing down the borders and having a one-world government guarantees that. There's nowhere you can move on Earth where things will be better for you than where you are right now. It's enforced dependency on the global government, enforced dependency on the private central bank, enforced dependency on corporate pharmaceuticals. And that enforced dependency is your slave chains. And that's why the American Revolution happened. They didn't want to be forced to be dependent on favored corporations like the British East India Company and the Bank of England to live their lives. And
exactly. People just need to go back and look at history. It's the same. This is exactly the same playbook to control mass population.
What I'm seeing here, though, and this is actually a good thing, they're acting in a state of panic. They woke up to the fact that they were losing their grip on the minds of America and the minds of the world a little too late, and now they're panicking. And everything that they try and do only reinforces that image that they're trying to establish a dictatorship over the entire globe. And people are going to dig their heels in on that, especially here in the United States of America. Anybody who's in a family who over the generations has lost members of their family in these wars to supposedly preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, they're not going to be very eager to all of a sudden throw away all that their ancestors gave their lives to preserve and protect.
That's another thing. I want people to look at any president, Bill Gates, any of these higher, extremely rich people who have any kids in the military on the front line. Not, Britain's kids, I don't know, I forgot their names, but, having them away from the action with the double guard of, special forces.
Well, that's how Al Gore went through Vietnam. He was in the back areas under heavy guard. He was never placed at risk. It was all so that he could say he'd served in the military when he ran for his political career. And it is all a fraud, and it's been going on all along. But the fraud doesn't work anymore if people don't blindly believe what the government and the media tells them. And that's why they're in a panic right now. They want to try and drag the world back to where Americans are dependent on the corporate media for everything they think they know about the world. And they can't tolerate any competition whatsoever. And that's why they're out there with this fake news nonsense, trying to poison the well with this Pizzagate issue. And as Ron Paul points out, the biggest liars in our society are the government and the corporate media. It's an uphill fight for them when they're out there screaming, you shouldn't trust the independent media, and Brian Williams still has his job at NBC. We all know they lied to us about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, Assad's weapons of mass destruction, the Lusitania, the attack on the USS Liberty, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. They have got a long, long laundry list of sins that the American people are now aware of every time they stand up there and try and pretend we're the truthful media and you should pay attention only to us.
Yeah, that's the thing. Fake news. You want to hear fake news? Saddam's weapons of destruction should have explained everything to any American about the lies or incubators. Remember that one from the first Gulf War?
Yeah.
Incubators by the Kuwaiti, what was it, the Kuwaiti daughter?
The daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador, and the whole thing was cooked up by PR firm Hill and Knowlton. And public relations is a fancy name for lying to the people for money. And it's a big, big business, and government is their largest customer.
Yep, and if Americans and people overseas don't understand that these people will lie to you, then you're a sucker and a chump. That's it. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Stealing some of my thunder there, but yeah, I mean, it's getting a little bit concerning, needless to say, besides Reddit shutting down the thread, the business owners in the area calling for websites to be shut down, and it's just allowing the media something they can run with and draw attention to every little detail like they usually do, the fallout is going to spread across if that doesn't get stopped. That's what they're trying to do, I think, is to label any conspiracy theory stuff needs to be shut down because it's going to just end up causing this sort of thing. You're a conspiracy theorist. A lot of the stuff, you talk about needs to be just.
I think they staged this shooting at the pizza shop to try and make the argument that those independent media conspiracy theory websites are causing violence in our society and therefore we're justified in shutting them down. And we're going to have to raise enough money to take it all the way to the Supreme Court and just say, we have a right to freedom of expression, and if you're going to shut us down because you think those websites reporting on Pizzagate caused violence, then what are you going to do about the corporate media that fanned up all the racial violence, Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman and all the riots that was caused? But that was all caused by the corporate media, not the independent media. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Mike. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the corporate media is making a big deal over the fact that Donald Trump did not appreciate a skit done by Alec Baldwin on Saturday Night Live about Donald Trump's tweeting. And basically, Donald has come on out saying, I am going to continue to tweet. If the corporate media would cover me accurately and honorably, I would have far less reason to tweet. Sadly, I don't know if that will ever happen. So the battle lines are being drawn. The corporate media is being basically kicked out of the pipeline between the president and the American people. And they don't like it one tiny bit. And that's why they're on the attack against him, and that's why their viewership and readership numbers are continuing to decline. All right, let's grab some phone calls. John in Barbados. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes, well, that lady who's pushing and pushing and pushing, I guess, will be leaving for her homeland shortly if Hillary steals the White House. But that homeland at the eastern end of the Mediterranean. But what I want to say is that if Hillary steals the White House, she's looking at being slapped with this EU collapse and the collapse of the euro currency causing a domino collapse right across the financial world. And the Democrats will get stuck with this nonsense of causing the U.S. economy to go into a downward spiral.
I mean, whoever's going to be the next president, and at this moment it's still going to be Donald Trump, they're being handed an economy that's on the verge of a meltdown. And the Absolutely. Fact that Hillary would, she's willing to deal with that because she wants to be the president. She wants to be the first woman president of the United States of America. And I don't think she's thinking very clearly. But again, we're dealing with an entire political corporate media establishment that is dead set against Donald Trump getting into that White House because it's the end of all the goodies that they've had. All the access, all the rides on Air Force One, the federal government turning a blind eye to massive corruption, that's all going to go away, and that's why they're all united against him. And if Jill Stein stumbles on this recount and the electors are all allowed to vote on December 19th and they put Donald Trump into the White House, I can guarantee you there will be an attempt on his life.
Well, I'm looking at what you were saying earlier. You now agree with me that Trey Gowdy should stay where he is to go after the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons in the...
He'll definitely be more focused. He'll be a lot more focused. But this idea that he could be appointed as special prosecutor, I would be very happy with that as well.
I would too. But I have to ask you a question,
real quick.
Is Claire, does she have a fire extinguisher? Because she seemed to be on fire today.
Yeah, we have fire extinguishers in every room of the house. All right, got to let you go, John. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And over at the Western Journalism Center, they're reporting a former Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent has gone public, saying that his experience is, yes, large numbers of illegal immigrants voted in this year's election. And again, you've got Obama out there saying, oh, it's impossible. It's impossible for illegal immigrants to vote in our elections. That's ridiculous. You can't possibly know because of the way the system is set up. It's a lot more difficult to get into the U.S. illegally than to vote illegally, and they got here, didn't they? Can you imagine the sales job that Obama is out there trying to do? Remember when he was out there, when Donald Trump was saying, you know, we're concerned about election fraud, and Obama came out, it's impossible to rig the U.S. election system, except for Russia. Russia can do it. Russia did it. Oh, Russia did it. That's how you know it's propaganda. It doesn't make any sense. When you line it all up and look at the whole picture, it's self-contradictory. It doesn't make any sense, and that's how you know it's propaganda. More than that, you know it's lousy propaganda. Because it is inconsistent. It's just whatever they think the people want to hear this week or whatever they want to say this week. All right, let's go back to the phones here. A couple more phone calls. Then we're going to close the lines, and we're going to get some more news reporting done. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I got a few things, but first, you really cracked me up when you were talking about how the Americans keep bombing Syrian infrastructure and like, oh, sorry, we blew up a hospital, my bad. Oh, whoops, we took out another water filtration plant. And you're like, we're sorry, we just have like these blind pilots, you know, with the guy in the white stick in the front and the dog in the back seat. Like, got such a good visual of that. Just I was rolling around laughing. And then the other story where the Trump protesters got run over on the highway.
Yes.
And then there's the next story, there's a VR movement where Bernie Sanders won. And then you're saying that the solution here is someone should hack into the VR program so that these guys start wandering around the highway.
Well, you know, we try and keep things a little bit light because we're dealing with some very serious topics that can be a little overwhelming at times. I mean, certainly right now, these next 2 weeks are going to be historic. And, you know, unfortunately, if Hillary succeeds in stealing the White House, I'm seeing a new civil war in this country. Nobody is going to accept Hillary Clinton as a legitimate president of this country, and I don't care how many, corporate media talking heads come on out and say, oh yes, this is the way it's supposed to be. You should believe us. Hillary, it should have been Hillary all along. What's wrong with you people? You voted for Donald Trump. And they're destroying their own credibility bit by bit. Both the federal government and the corporate media, they've certainly destroyed our public image around the world with all of this shenanigans. And we're dealing here with a group of people who are so focused on their own self-interest, they don't care what harm they cause to the nation as a whole. And the reason we need to stand up and be opposed to this, Hillary Clinton is not just trying to steal the White House. She's trying to steal the nation. She's trying to steal your future tax money. She's trying to steal the lives of your children who will be killed and crippled in all of these wars that Hillary's backers want to see happen.
Yeah, the only threat for the inauguration is that a few states are in the middle of recounts. So wouldn't the solution be that if Trump ties up a few other states that Hillary won, take those off the table so that they level the playing field so that it wouldn't be 15 electors that would have to be turned? It would have to be like 50?
No, because the deadlines to demand a recount have already passed in all the states. See, Jill Stein waited until the very last second to do this, knowing that Donald Trump would not be able to go out to states where Hillary won and demand a recount there. Plus, there's the public image thing. Donald Trump doesn't want to get down in the mud with Jill Stein, and that may be another reason why Hillary let Jill Stein go out on point. Would make Donald Trump look like this bully beating up on this poor, helpless Jill Stein who really didn't have any standing in the election anyway. So, but the reality here is that the goal of Jillery is to prevent Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania's electors from taking part in the Electoral College in 2 weeks. That's their real goal. That will narrow Donald Trump's lead in electors down to where just a handful, 15, 16 electors, bribed, threatened, blackmailed to change their vote from Trump to Hillary, will hand her the White House. Now, Congress has the option to override the Electoral College if members of the House and Senate believe the Electoral College did not act in good faith, which with all these stories about death threats against the electors, the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania giving out the home addresses and phone numbers of the electors so that they can be harassed, there's absolutely no question the Electoral College is not looking like they're acting in good faith and fulfillment of their office. They're basically, they've become the latest ping pong ball in Hillary Clinton's quest for the White House. We're going to take a second here to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And again, if Hillary steals the White House, nobody's going to see it as legitimate. It is going to end the United States image abroad as being a democracy. They're going to see us as another third world dictatorship with all the evils appertaining thereto. And she could trigger a civil war. I'm hearing so much anger out there over this repeat of Florida 2000 and the absolute joke our election systems have become.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton. Hey, just one last thing about the Pizzagate. Don't worry, you're not going to be opposed to what I'm saying. Is that what if this was a limited hangout poison the well, where, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand where you're going. No, well, it's being played.
Can I say why I say that?
Well, I would rather not, because I got to get on to another phone call here. So thank you very much, Mateus. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Michael. I don't know if you saw it today, and I just joined, but there was a law passed where it's now, I think Congress passed it, where any criticism of Israel is now anti-Semitic hate speech. And also, New York State Governor Cuomo came out and is targeting any company that participates in BDS.
Well, we know who he's working for, and it isn't the people in New York, is it?
No, it's sure not. But Mike, when you look at Soros being behind all these illegal aliens and all the people coming from South America and all the European illegal aliens, and the fact that the mainstream media, they're targets. I mean, they are on the outs. There's no doubt about it. And they are savagely trying to get back in with now this whole Russian thing, this new McCarthyism, this anybody who disagrees with the government is wrong, and it's actually going to be illegal. That's where we're headed. This is the media that is owned. Everybody knows who owns this media.
Yes.
And look, by the way, since they've been in control, this media has, and the corporations that control the media and the people that control the corporations, for so long, look where they've targeted American military power. It's all for, in the Middle East, it's all taking on Israel's enemies.
Except for that little thing up in Ukraine where they're going after Russia, and over there in the South China Sea where they're going after China.
Right, but that's not where our military is right now, or for the last 15 years. But it's clear to me that this is Well, I know you have a restriction on this stuff, but everybody connect the dots here, please.
Let me tell you what my restriction is, because I want to clarify that, because I got a lot of emails on this thing, okay? As far as I'm concerned, it's open season on the actions of the government of Israel, okay, and its supporters. Where I draw the line is when somebody calls in and says the Jews are doing this and the Jews are doing that. That opens us up to charges of anti-Semitism. And again, there are good Jewish people and there are bad Jewish people. There are good Christians and bad Christians. There are good Muslims and there are bad Muslims. I've known some real nasty Jewish people in Hollywood. And I've known, some really, really nice, good people. Again, Renee Valente was an absolute angel. But if you want to criticize the government of Israel and its influence over our government, have at it. There's no restriction there as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Michael, I just want to point out that it's the only group of people that it's now illegal to criticize, that our First Amendment rights don't apply to.
And it's utterly ridiculous. I mean, that's like over in Germany saying you can't criticize the Nazis because it's just German hate. I mean, that's how ridiculous this is. But we're seeing our First Amendment under attack by our own government, by the government of Israel, by the corporations. They want to get rid of all this idea of free speech and free thought. They want us all as their mind slaves in order to harvest the greatest amount of wealth off of us by, selling us dangerous vaccines and feeding us poisonous food. It's all about maximizing profitability.
Well, if they can control the minds and control the laws, they can control pretty much everything.
Well, they used to think that, but here's the problem. They're losing control of the minds of the people of planet Earth, and that's why they're in a panic right now.
And that's why your website and others like it that tell the truth are in imminent danger. So,
well, here's the good news. Even if they find a way to shut us all down, do you think the American public are going to go back to trusting the TV news networks overnight? No, they won't. We're in a situation virtually identical to the Soviet Union just before it fell apart, where everybody had to read Pravda and Izvestia and Soviet TV, and everybody knew they were lying. And that's the stage we're at right now. I hold out a hope that we can avoid the collapse of the United States with Trump in the White House. But it's a real risk even with Trump in the White House, and it's a dead certainty if Hillary steals that White House. We're going to see the end of the United States of America. It's going to collapse the way the Soviet Union did, and we better be ready to take care of ourselves and our families and our friends when that happens, because it's going to be very rough for a few months, and then we're going to form a new country with more common sense, based on that original model for the United States of power and authority diffused across the land, and the central government deliberately hamstrung and limited so they can't be such a pain in the neck.
And Mike, for me anyways, and I think the accountability thing is so important. It's more important than anything. I hope that Trump hounds Hillary Clinton and Podesta and Soros to the ends of the earth until he gets them, because until these guys are held accountable, we have nothing.
There is no justice in this country as long as the Clintons and the Bushes and all of these people continue to walk free. But I'll tell you where the emphasis really ought to be, and that's on that Clinton Foundation, because it clearly is not a 501c3. It's donated very little of its immense wealth to actual charitable work, and even that was a little messed up. The money they supposedly donated to Haiti following the earthquake was actually used to buy up the Haitians' land for pennies on the dollar and turn it over for development of resorts. And the Haitian people got almost nothing other than cholera out of the intervention of their nation. And, I think that Clinton Foundation is the heart of the corruption, the money flow, the money laundry.
And not only that, it has the widest impact, Mike. I mean,
yes.
it would really cut out a whole lot of the corruption in Washington.
It's gonna sweep on both sides of the aisle, high and low. Everybody's going to get caught in that, and it needs to be brought out. And like I said before, we cannot leave a nation with a two-tiered justice system for our children to grow up in, where ordinary people are held to the letter of the law, some of which are pretty ridiculous, and the elites can do whatever they want without fear of any kind of punishment, just like medieval nobility.
And not beyond just the letter of the law, Mike, we can be held to stuff like indefinite detention without even a charge.
Yes.
I mean, we can be held to all that, but they're not held to anything.
No, they're not.
So.
No, they're not. I mean, I think Edward Snowden came on out and said, Petraeus revealed more top secrets than Snowden did. But he got a wrist slap and was at least up for a while under consideration as Secretary of State. Apparently, Trump has passed on him as well. But whistleblowers are hounded to the ends of the earth. Everybody wants Snowden pardoned. And what is Obama doing? He's signing record numbers of pardons and commutations of sentences, overwhelmingly for cocaine dealers. That's who's getting Obama's presidential pardons in the last weeks of his term in office.
And the only reason they went after Petraeus for even what they got was because Obama feared he would run against him in 2012.
Yeah, that was a factor.
That's the real reason why they went after him.
We need to keep something in mind. We need to keep something in mind. The House of Representatives could end this recount nonsense tomorrow by voting to impeach former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton for lying under oath, which we now know she did. The House of Representatives could impeach her and vote the impeachment. We don't have to go to the Senate for removal from office because she's out of office. But in our history, there have been times when Congress has impeached people after they leave office in order to block them from ever holding an office of trust again. And the House of Representatives can actually do that. They could impeach Hillary Clinton for lying under oath about Benghazi. That would invalidate her eligibility to be president.
God, I wish they'd do that, Mike. Oh, man. Well, thank you very much for the time, Mike. Go get them, man.
All right, I certainly will. We're going to close our phone lines for a little while. We're going to get some news out here. There's a lot of stuff going on out here. Now, over at BuzzFeed, they were running the story that the Russian government was using fake news to get Trump elected. It turned out U.S. intelligence planted that story on BuzzFeed. It's like Ron Paul says. If you want to know the source of the fake news, it's primarily the government and the corporate media. And Trump's spokeswoman, Kellyanne Conway, was making the talk show rounds over the weekend, and she was on CNN's State of the Union Sunday, and Robbie Mook was out there screaming that Clinton's loss to Trump was largely on the spread of fake news, at which point Kellyanne Conway reminded him that the biggest fake news story of the entire election was against Donald Trump. The claim that Russia was backing him and trying to support his victory by rigging U.S. elections. There's never been any proof of it. It was fake news. The corporate media are, even as they scream that the independent media are the fake news, the corporate media continues being the worst offender in that regard. And it's like I said before, their business model is not reporting of the news to the American people and making advertising revenues off of it. They are paid huge amounts of money by their corporate masters to control what you think, to decide for you what is important, what should not be paid attention to sell you the next tax, the next policy, the next war, the next president. They can't stop doing that or the big money dries up and they have to live without those $1 million paychecks. And that's why even as the corporate media comes on out screaming that the independent media is the fake news, they're still lying. They're still getting caught lying because they can't stop. They're trapped by their own greed. Now, over at Yahoo News, one of their columnists is now saying that the United States should have a law requiring the public schools indoctrinate young children to believe whatever the corporate media says and to pay no attention to any alternative websites out on the Internet. They're all bad. They're all working for the Russians. If you visit their website, you'll get diseases and your nose will drop off. Just like when I was a kid where the schools were propagandizing us to just hate anything connected with the Soviet Union without thinking about it. Except I thought about it here. Now, the other point of view, and this is coming out of Veterans News Now, it's time for the American people to hold the corporate media to account. And they're asking, why can't RICO charges or civil lawsuits be brought to bear? When we come back from these commercials, I will explain why that is. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So we're responding to this article that came out of Veterans News Now. The American people must hold the corporate media to account, and yes, we have to. This article asks, why can't RICO charges or civil lawsuits be brought against the 6 heads of the major corporate media organized enterprises? And the reason is very simple. There is actually no law that requires the corporate media to be truthful with you, the American people. And this was illustrated a few years back in what was called the Fox News synthetic bovine growth hormone lawsuit. And the story on that one, and this is very illustrative of corporate media. Fox News assigned 2 of their top reporters to do a story about the wonderful benefits of Monsanto's new synthetic bovine growth hormone. And these reporters went on out, and in doing the research for the story, they discovered that consumers who were eating the dairy products and the meat from the treated cows were getting these very strange medical issues that seemed linked to that hormone. And they wrote up the story accurately. They came on back, gave it to Fox News. Now, Fox News gets a lot of ad revenues from Monsanto, so they basically told the reporters to take out the negative stuff. The reporters stood their ground, and Fox News fired them. The reporters sued Fox News for wrongful termination, and they lost on appeal when the judge ruled that because there is no law requiring the corporate media to be truthful with you, the American people, corporate media management has a legal right to order their prostitutes and correspondents to lie to you. And if the prostitutes and correspondents refuse to do so, they can legally be fired for cause. And that tells you all you need to know about the corporate media. But there is another way to hold them to account. And that is to keep a record of the advertisers who are advertising on corporate media and simply refuse to buy their products, and go to the websites of these advertisers and send in a comment mail saying, I am no longer buying your products because you are advertising on the lying corporate media. And they'll get the message. And people are already doing that. Mark Zuckerberg, ever since the Trump election, has lost $3.7 billion. Now, it's just a small part of his overall fortune. He's still a very, very wealthy man. But Facebook's stock has declined 7% from November 8th to last Friday. People are leaving Facebook, and they're going to the new startup, social media. Scene Life, Gab, all the rest of that. And that's really going to be how we hold them to account. We don't take our business to corporate media that lies and censors. We don't take our business to those who advertise on corporate media that lies and censors. They'll get the message. And turnabout is fair play because we've already heard how online advertisers are now starting to cut off websites that are Russian propaganda outlets and deny them ad revenues. As James Corbett says, this is outright war. It's a propaganda war. It's an economic war. Who knows where it's going to go from that? Now let's talk about this Pizzagate nonsense. I've been saying right from the very beginning, it didn't feel real. It was all based on a lot of assumptions about there were certain words in the Podesta emails that were assumed to be code words for something else involving child sexual abuse. But it was all without any foundation, and it just felt wrong. And I issued a warning to my fellow members of the independent media. I said, be careful on this one. It feels like a false flag for some reason. And sure enough, the corporate media is out there saying, all of these websites, we're out there accusing this innocent pizza shop of being a front for child sexual abuse. See, you can't believe anything that they say. And they're specifically going after Alex Jones on this. Well, the situation ramped up a little bit because Sunday there was a man who took a rifle into this Washington pizza restaurant, supposedly inspired by conspiracy theories. He wanted to do his own investigation. More when we come back from these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about this shooter who walked into the pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. With apparently a rifle and pointed a gun at a restaurant employee. Didn't fire. Apparently fired one shot inside the restaurant. Nothing, and nobody was actually hurt. Then he waited for the police to show up. And this feels like a setup so that the media is out there already saying those conspiracy websites are leading to violence, and that's why they have to be shut down. It turns out the guy who was arrested has a very tiny entry in the Internet Movie Database. He's been an actor, a writer, a production assistant on some low-budget movies. But it just, it's a setup. They're trying to create something, blame it on us in the independent media, and then hue and cry. We have to shut down the independent media. Look at the violence they're causing. And as I said before to the phone call, let's look at all the racial violence that was caused by poor reporting by the corporate media or outright fraudulent reporting by the corporate media during the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman situation, the Baltimore Black Lives Matter riots. All that violence was caused by inflammatory reporting by the corporate media. Nobody says let's shut them down. Story coming out of the Daily Beast. They're specifically going after Alex Jones. Pizzagate gunman liked Alex Jones. Oh my goodness, he liked Alex Jones. And this is an attack not only on Alex Jones, but on Donald Trump, who specifically singled out Alex Jones for being very supportive, figurehead of the independent media who was supporting Donald Trump. Meanwhile, back in the so-called real media, the CIA-backed non-governmental organization, the White Helmets, have been caught once again faking videos of supposed cruelty by Assad against his own people to try and convince you, the American people, to just defy international law, risk war with Russia. We have to do regime change in Syria. Those poor, suffering Syrian people. Well, the Syrian people are suffering, but they're suffering from 5 years of U.S. efforts to overthrow Syria's legitimate elected government and impose puppet rule. Just like Hillary Clinton right now is trying to overthrow the duly elected government of the United States and insert herself as a puppet ruler. Now, there was a big stink about a rash of graffiti in South Philadelphia, racist comments, I support Donald Trump, white power now, Nazis, sprayed, painted on cars and homes all around South Philadelphia. They finally got the guy. Turns out he's black. It's another hoax. It's another hoax. Another incident was over at the Northwestern University, where racist and homophobic messages, along with phallic symbols and the word Trump and swastikas, were sprayed inside a campus chapel. One of the two people that have now been arrested for the crime is a Jewish student. It's all fakery. It's all hoax. Now let's turn to the war zones. A lot of stuff going on over there. The Syrian army has liberated an additional 6 districts in Aleppo from the U.S.-backed terrorists. It's only a matter of time before it all comes apart here. Now, Russia has started issuing broadcast messages over Aleppo telling the jihadis, leave now or you will die as terrorists. This is going to be the final push. Now, as you know, the U.S. is still acting like they have some legal, legitimate reason to be in Syria, even though Syria's government doesn't want them there. Syria's people don't want them there. Russia certainly doesn't want them there. And every time Russia and Syria come out with something that they're going to do to end this conflict, John Kerry comes on out and says, it's nonsense, it won't work, it's ridiculous, it's stupid. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has just called John Kerry's bluff and says, okay, I need from you a concrete proposal that will end this war and leave Syria under the control of the Syrian government. And of course, Kerry can't reply because the U.S. agenda is Assad out of Damascus and a puppet ruler ruling Syria for the benefit of American multinational national corporations here. And it's getting even uglier than that. Apparently, Syrian terrorists bombed a Russian hospital. Remember, Russia has sent in these mobile medical hospitals to try and ease the suffering of the civilians in Syria. And Syrian terrorists just bombed one of them. And apparently, Russia's intelligence agencies intercepted communications in which the CIA told the terrorists where the Russian hospital was. Now, this goes beyond bad eyesight leading to the U.S. bombing hospitals and food storage and water filtration and so forth. If this is true, the CIA has committed treason, giving aid and comfort to the enemy in times of war, because you have been told ISIS and Al-Qaeda are our enemies in the war on terror. Obama sent them weapons. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sent them weapons. Now the CIA is giving them ground intelligence to pick their targets. Now over in Israel, there's sort of an unofficial campaign to suppress the presence, at least psychologically, of the Muslims. They passed a law saying that the mosques could no longer do the call to prayer, the announcement from the top of the minaret where they call the faithful in for their prayers. And that law was passed because apparently the non-Muslim citizens of Israel prefer to sleep in late, and they were being very disturbed by these. So this has immediately resulted in smartphone apps appearing all over Israel that will tell the faithful when to collect for prayer without disturbing anybody. Now the Ministry of Transportation in Israel has ordered an Israeli bus company stop broadcasting their announcements in Arabic in the city of Beersheba. The announcements are now only allowed in Hebrew, not in Arabic. Don't want the local Muslim population knowing where the buses are going. Now, as one of our callers mentioned, there is a bill that's being introduced into the Congress called the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And this is sponsored by Senator Bob Casey, Democrat of Pennsylvania, and Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina. And basically, this bill is to give the U.S. Department of Education the necessary statutory tools at their disposal to investigate anti-Jewish incidents on college campuses, with anti-Jewish including criticism of the actions of the government of Israel or expressing support for the Palestinians. And this is utterly ridiculous. That's like saying you can't criticize the Nazis because you're being anti-German. The criticisms are directed at the activities of a government. That is the very speech protected by the First Amendment. To recognize our right to criticize the actions of government anywhere. So that's what they're out there trying to do. Now, the government of Iraq has complained to the United Nations over the United Nations reporting of Iraqi casualty figures. And they singled out November's report of 1,959 deaths among the Iraq security forces, who are arrayed against, presumably, ultimately backed by the U.S., ISIS and Kurds. And the Iraq army is claiming the UN is exaggerating, and the United Nations has now agreed to stop reporting on those numbers. In other words, it's not going as well as they'd like, and they don't want the people to know. If you are my age, you will remember during the war in Vietnam, they were lying about how many of our kids were being killed and crippled. We didn't get the real honest numbers until after the war was over. And then we were stunned as to how many of our young kids had died or been crippled in those jungles. Now, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, is out there insisting that even after this war on ISIS is over, the U.S. must stay in Iraq. We have to garrison that country and make sure they do what we tell them to do. A permanent U.S. presence in Iraq, which will go along as smoothly as the permanent U.S. presence in Afghanistan, which has been running now for 15 years, and the place is still a disaster. Now, I guess John Kerry is really feeling the pressure, or maybe he's just realizing his days as Secretary of State are numbered, and so he can be a little bit more honest, and he's out there in unusually stark terms, telling Israel that we understand you're deliberately sabotaging the peace process. At the Saban Forum, an annual gathering of senior Israeli and U.S. policymakers, Kerry said some members of Netanyahu's government had made profoundly disturbing statements about how there will never, ever be a Palestinian state. And we know that's their expressed attitude. They dream of Eretz Israel, the Israel described in the Torah, in the Old Testament, reaching from the Nile to the Euphrates. Now, surprisingly, there's been a poll conducted here among Democrats in the United States of America, and the majority of the Democrats surveyed believe Israel is a burden on the United States and has way too much influence on American politics. And yes, they're right. Israel has way too much influence on our politics. They're already weighing on in regarding who can and cannot be appointed by Donald Trump because they're not a friend of Israel. Only friends of Israel are allowed to be on Donald Trump's administration. And Israel is a burden. The American taxpayer has been forced to give Israel something like 10 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program, and we do not have a giant leap for mankind or even an updated version of Velcro for all that money. Now, a major Israeli-American billionaire donor to the U.S. Democratic Party has tried to obstruct the nomination of a Muslim congressman to become chair of the Democratic National Committee, accusing him of an anti-Israel stance. So now Israel wants to choose who's running the parties inside the United States of America. Same thing over with one of Trump's other nominees, James Mattis. Apparently back in 2013, Mattis was being interviewed by Wolf Blitzer, and he made a comment about how the way Israel is treating the Palestinians does amount to apartheid, which a lot of people agree with. And now they're trying to use it to say, he's an anti-Semite, he's a Jew hater, he can't be Secretary of Defense, he's not on board with Israel's agenda. Now, Matisse is hardly alone in describing the Israeli system as apartheid. Bishop Desmond Tutu has made that observation. So have a lot of people. And the corporate media are using it to attack him, to attack Trump, by saying he's an anti-Semite. And anti-Semite used to be defined as somebody who hated Jews just because they were Jews. And by the way, Semites also include Arabs. If you hate Arabs just because they're Arabs, you're being an anti-Semite, because they're all Semitic people. Except for the Ashkenazi, who are actually Central Asian. You can see how confused this is. But Israel and the corporate media are trying to convince you that anti-Semite means anybody who's critical of the actions of the government of Israel. And like I said, that is as nonsensical as saying you can't criticize the Nazis because you're being anti-German. Or you can't criticize Washington, D.C. because you're being anti-American, which they're aiming at right now, by the way. Now, ISIS has issued a warning. that if Donald Trump is inaugurated on January 20th, they will declare war. They're going to call it Bloody Friday. And that, to me, is more proof that ISIS is and has been working for Obama and Hillary all along. Little bit of a surprise news coming out of New Zealand. Prime Minister John Key resigns. Apparently it was rather sudden. He made the announcement shortly after posting his own tweet about a Christmas tree. But he came on out and said, this is the hardest decision I've ever made. I don't know what I'll do next. And we don't know what's about to break in terms of political scandal down there, but Key has stepped down. Now let's talk about this rush to war and whether we're really able to do it. And we're going to pick on the F-35 again. As you know, not too long ago, the F-35 was sent up for dogfights against 1970s vintage aircraft, like the F-15. And it lost badly. Congress is now demanding a fly-off between the A-10 assault aircraft, which is 40 years old, and the F-35 jets, just to see which is the top gun. Now, the A-10 is a ground attack aircraft. It was never intended to be a dogfighter, but it is a very effective, efficient aircraft. And I'm glad they've abandoned their decision to scrap them and replace it with some new whiz-bang piece of junk that'll cost the taxpayers huge amounts of money. Now, as you know, yesterday Italy had their referendum for constitutional change, and it was badly defeated. And Prime Minister Renzi has already said he's going to resign. And so far, the world markets have kind of shrugged it off. It didn't trigger a global meltdown like a lot of people were saying it was going to. But Italy's banks are in trouble. And they're asking, who will come to the rescue? Who's got the money to come to the rescue? Unicredit is now in a position of trying to raise 12 billion euros of fresh capital because of the referendum defeat. Where are they going to get it from? They're running out of corks over there in that little wooden boat called the EU. A lot of people are watching Monte Paschi. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Let me get my volume set correctly. Now then, we're talking about the Italian referendum, which went down to heavy defeat yesterday. Renzi is already said he's going to resign, as he promised he was going to do. And Italy's major banks are in trouble because the purpose of this referendum was to consolidate power in the Italian government and to open up options to prop up the Italian banks, again, on the backs of the Italian people, and that's why they voted no. People around the world have had enough of them having to make do with less because the bankers need more. It's a tough sell in this day and age. So, along with Unicredit, a lot of people are paying attention to Monte Paschi, which was in dire need of a new bailout, and with the referendum gone down in flames, that bailout is now under threat. And they're casting around trying to find somebody who's going to capitalize them, and that is a real tall order. Because look at how all the banks, both in Europe and the United States, they're constantly being recapitalized. TARP, bailout, bail-in, haircut, and they still go back into trouble. Why? Because private central banks, by design, create more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the debt overwhelms the system. The problem isn't that the Italians aren't paying enough taxes. The problem isn't that the Italians are just disloyal and not spending enough money to keep the economy going. The problem is private central banks are naturally unstable. They are pyramid schemes. And I wrote an article a while back called The 11th Marble, which illustrates the whole idea. Any 5-year-old boy knows that if you put 10 marbles into a tin can, you can only take 10 marbles out. But private central bankers believe they can put $10 into an economy and pull $11 out. By issuing that public currency as a loan at interest, that's how they siphon the wealth of the country into their own pockets. But it's unstable. No matter how hard people work, no matter what they sacrifice, the debt grows and grows and grows until it overwhelms the system, and that's what's happening right now. Now, in a classic case of really ill-considered timing, up in Germany, Wolfgang Schäuble is saying that Greece must reform or leave the Eurozone. And the Greeks already want to leave the Eurozone. And you need to remember, when somebody who's on board with the European Union and the European Central Bank or the World Bank or IMF or any of those people, when they say reform, what that means is find a way to take more from the people to keep our banks ticking along just a little bit longer. That's what they mean by reform. Real reform, which is closing down the private central banks in favor of a government-issued interest-free currency, they're never going to go along with that. Now, in another example of the corporate media just saying whatever they can to harm Donald Trump. All right, we're going to leave this till after the top of the hour. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines now and take some phone calls here. And the phone line is 800-313-9443. Now then, the corporate media has declared war on Donald Trump because he's not going to play their games. He's literally moving around the corporate news media because he doesn't trust them to accurately report what he's doing to the American people. So he's out there on Twitter. He's got his own YouTube channel. Apparently his family's getting ready to start their own Trump TV channel, and I'd like to know where to send a resume on that one. And so CNBC actually came on out attacking Donald Trump for the Carrier air conditioning deal, saying how badly it harmed Mexican workers. Just think of all those Mexican workers who aren't going to have a job now because Donald Trump did that. CNBC, pay attention here. Donald Trump is not the president of Mexico. He's the president of the United States of America. Now, if you're all that concerned about what's going on in Mexico, kindly relocate. I'm sure nobody will interfere if CNBC wants to relocate their studios down there near Mexico City, hopefully right on the earthquake fault. Now, Donald Trump is threatening to impose a 35% tax on products from companies moving to other countries. And I think this is going to discourage a lot of people from moving or offshoring jobs. Now remember, back when George W. Bush was president, the tax code was actually changed to allow, to actually give an economic advantage to companies that offshored their jobs. They got a tax break. All Trump needs to do is change the tax laws back, and the jobs will start coming back here. Of course, he's facing an obstructionist Congress that is filled with all these New World Order globalists, and that's why we're going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and glare through those office windows at the senators and representatives and remind them, you work for us. You don't work for Israel. You don't work for Big Pharma. You don't work for Wall Street. If you forget that, we'll do to you next election what we did to Hillary Clinton this election, and all the election fraud in the world is not going to save you. Now, everyone's always talking about the national debt, the national debt, the national debt, blah, 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 blah. And it should come as no surprise that the U.S. government is being as dishonest with the national debt as they are the unemployment figures, where they're celebrating a 4.6 unemployment rate in a country with 95 million Americans unable to find a job. As it turns out, when you calculate in all the unfunded liabilities the federal government has committed to, we're going to do this, we don't have the money yet, we'll get it someplace, the actual scale of federal government debt is $210 trillion with a T dollars. That works out to $666,000 for every American citizen. Actually, this is miswritten. But it's a big chunk of money. It's almost $1 million for every single American family. The Baltic Dry Index has lost another 2 points, a further indicator that manufacturing is slowing down because people aren't buying stuff in the stores. And by the way, the other day I went by our local shopping mall and I looked in that parking lot, and this was yesterday, Sunday, when nobody's working, and it was surprisingly very empty. So, anyway. Now, Turkey, which has called off merging with the European Union for very good reasons, is now proposing direct trade with China, Russia, and Iran in their own local currencies, not going through the euro, not going through the dollar. The petrodollar Bretton Woods model is collapsing. And when it does, the U.S. economy is finished. Because we don't have the manufacturing to support a healthy economy. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. The only thing holding up the economy right now is forcing other nations to use the U.S. dollar for cross-border trade and banking, and fewer nations are willing to go along with that. Over in Iran, a second billionaire, Babak Zanjani, has been sentenced to death for corruption during the Ahmadinejad presidency. I think we need some of that here. I think we need to start looking at Iran and Iceland on how to deal with political and banking corruption. Throw them in jail or execute them. Don't just loot the people and bail them out time and time again. They don't seem to learn to do a better job when you have that sort of automatic bailout reinforcement mechanism going on. You need to disincentivize corruption and fraud, not just keep rewarding it. Now, over in Europe, the immigration situation is starting to get a little bit tight. There's literally war on Denmark's streets. Migrant chaos sparks clashes between police and protesters. 11 people arrested. And apparently the main confrontation was between Pegida and the pro-immigration counter-protesters. So it's turning violent over there. It's like the whole world is descending into civil war. But remember what I said, this push to create a single global government has created a political climate conducive to a global revolution. And it does seem like it's popping up all over the place. I saw a headline earlier today about how populism is breaking out all over the world, and what a terrible thing that is. Now, apparently, a young lady, Maria Leidenberger, was returning from a party in Freiburg in Germany when she was assaulted on a cycle path. She was raped and then drowned. And the suspect is an Afghan migrant, identified by DNA. And what makes it rather difficult is that Maria Leidenberger is the daughter of a high-ranking EU official. So now that it's starting to hit in their own families and their own home, I wonder if they're going to still be as enthusiastic about this open borders for refugees but not for the Europeans policy. Down in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott made headlines for banning sanctuary cities. Now he's banning sanctuary universities. He's signing a new law that will ban state universities from giving sanctuary to illegal aliens. This is the pushback against all this nonsense. In fact, here's this article I was talking about. Populism is sweeping the planet. Italy's Renzi is gone. Hillary is gone, we hope. Francois Hollande is gone. Merkel is going to be next. Now, out in the Dakotas, over the weekend, we heard from the federal government that they were going to now block the Dakota Access Pipeline. And they did it by simply having the Army Corps of Engineers deny the permit for the pipeline company to continue the construction through the Sioux burial grounds and over the water supply. And of course, the party was really starting, but there's been a little bit of a wrinkle. I am not kidding you. This is being reported in the Free Thought Project and other places. The company building the pipeline Energy Transfer Partners and Sunoco Logistics has literally come on out and said they will defy the federal government and they will continue to construct their pipeline. They're going to have their pipeline. They don't care what the federal government says. It's going to be interesting to see what the federal government reaction to this is going to be. This may be the beginning of a pushback by the federal government to the corporations to remind the corporations they are subordinate in this nation. They don't run the place, and they got to stop acting like it. Now, while we were all being distracted by the election and Jill Stein and Pizzagate and the rest of it, the Senate just passed a bill that has outlawed GMO labeling all across the nation. The Senate bill just renders null and void all state laws that require GMO foods be labeled. You will eat your food. You don't have to know what's in it. Just trust us. We know what's best for you. No, they don't. I'm, at my age, having to keep a list of things I cannot allow into my body. And I have been going through some issues of discomfort that I don't need to go into in fine detail. But I finally tracked the culprit down. It's a material called carrageenan, and it's added to certain dairy products to make them seem thicker. And as it turns out, this carrageenan is a known intestinal irritant. It's even been linked to cancer. But as long as it's making money, they're going to go on selling it. So now there's something else I have to look for on the labels. And since banning carrageenan from my diet, my problem has now gone away. Our entire human population is being managed for one purpose and one purpose only, to maximize the profits coming out of your pocket. They don't care if you're sick. In fact, they get more money from you if you're sick. They get more money from you if you're afraid. They get more money from you if you're delusional about the true state of the world and what the government is up to. That's all it is. Getting more money from you, that's all you're worth to our leaders. Just like those medieval nobility. Now, you remember back when Flint was having their water crisis, children's brains were being poisoned by lead coming from the tap water. One pharmaceutical company was caught cashing in. Valiant Pharmaceuticals hiked the price of a medication that treats severe lead poisoning. They hiked it by a stunning 2,700% from 2013 to 2015, meaning most of Flint's poor people couldn't afford it. Our current medical industrial complex is not about people's health. It's about making more money from you. And we have seen several of these scandals where medications that are very inexpensive to produce are acquired by opportunists who have the exclusive licensing rights, and they'll run the price up. And then, of course, people will turn away from the pharmacies and look for natural, homeopathic treatments that will do the same thing. And then they're told, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You will be dependent on your pharmacy, no matter what it costs. And, of course, that out-of-control pricing on all of this stuff is one of the reasons why Obamacare is such a disaster. They're in this horrible spiral of skyrocketing prices. We have the most expensive health care on earth by a huge margin, and it ranks something like 37th in quality. And the overall health of the American people is considered poor. Now, getting on back to real media versus fake media. Story coming out of John Rappaport, talking about how back in 2014 he did an interview with Cheryl Atkinson in which he talked about her spearheading coverage of the swine flu pandemic. Remember the when pigs fly flu? We talked about it a lot here. And how Cheryl Atkinson had discovered that the CDC had stopped keeping track of the number of swine flu cases in America and continued to scream pandemic, pandemic, pandemic. Now, we know the World Health Organization artificially lowered the threshold of the number of cases needed to declare it a pandemic. And the CDC just stopped counting. there weren't that many people who came down with it. When it was all over, the 2009 When Pigs Fly flu was actually milder than the normal seasonal flu. It was a marketing campaign to scare you all into buying and stockpiling Tamiflu. And Roche Pharmaceuticals made a fortune off of this fear campaign. Now, yesterday, actually Friday, we talked about this study that had come on out, and the abstract of the study was published online in Frontiers in Public Health. It was accepted for publication November 2nd. They had peer-reviewed it. And basically, it was a study of vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. Actually, they were making several studies, but when they realized that they had a statistically significant number of children who were being homeschooled and withheld from the mandated vaccines, they realized they finally had a control group. Now, remember in the movie Vaxxed, we saw Congress grilling the CDC constantly. Was there ever a study comparing neurological disorders in vaccinated children versus unvaccinated? And the CDC just danced around and said, well, we did this. And Congressman kept coming on back and saying, I'm asking a simple question. Has there ever been a study of rates of neurological diseases between vaccinated and unvaccinated children? And the CDC was forced to admit, no, they'd never done that. Now, in this study, where they had a group of unvaccinated children to work from, they did do that analysis and discovered vaccinated children are 3 times more likely to develop neurological diseases, including autism, than unvaccinated children. That is a significant finding. And to nobody's surprise, Frontiers in Public Health has now withdrawn the abstract from their website. And they're responding to inquiries saying, we're restudying this. Somebody yanked their financial leash. And this smacks of that study that was done in France that showed GMO and glyphosate were leading to massive health problems in lab rats that were being fed on it. And this journal that had published the article hired somebody who previously worked for Monsanto, who immediately threw the whole study away. Other labs around the world have replicated the study, and they've gotten the same results. This is a reproducible result, and it's valid. And we are in the grip of a government and corporate culture that is perfectly okay selling you something that's actually bad for you as long as they can make that sale. As long as they can make that sale. And it gets even worse. Story coming out of Natural Blaze. Top doctors are coming forward to say that the issue isn't whether vaccine adjuvants are bad for you or whether the vaccines are really effective. What these doctors are saying is this constant soaking of our bodies in vaccines is actually destroying our own immune system and turning it against us, what are called autoimmune disorders. And just like is the case with autism, the incidence of autoimmune disorders is just spiking and skyrocketing. We're going to take a phone call here from 10 Bears. Aloha, 10 Bears. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. A couple of things. I have a lot of interest in what you're talking about at the moment, but I've been listening since the top of the show, and I just had to say on the recount matter, I've been paying attention to all these various headlines and defenses and arguments, and at one point I seen an article that was being shopped around about Hillary winning 100 counties or 100 precincts or something, and I went through and I counted. I went to the Yahoo election site that they had on election night, and I checked every county, state by state, tallied them up, and out of the 3,144 county/equivalents we've got in this country, she took 470. I could be off by 1 to 5, but, that's 1 to 5 individual counties out of all 3,144. She didn't even get 15%.
No, she didn't. Hillary got huge leads in those urban areas where the illegals are clustered and where the election fraud people like to work.
Right. And on that, I wanted to make a note. Because everybody talks about, well, Trump went on and he said 2 million illegals voted. He has no basis for that. Well, the people who are actually doing recounts, not a single one of these states have proffered up a legitimate basis for the recount. So I find it ridiculous that we can put any support behind the recounts that are actually going on and take 100% of legitimacy away from the claim that Trump made when nobody's even looked twice at it. We just ruled it out of hand because he said so. Well, Jill Stein said so. And in Michigan here, we're going to end up paying for the whole freaking recount. And what we ended up doing, as I understand it in this state, was because of the margin being so close, we did a hand recount, which is why it took so long for us to certify.
Yeah, you've already done a recount. It's ridiculous to say that a new recount is going to change anything unless they're bringing in boxes and boxes of new forged ballots. Thank you for the phone call,
Right.
10 Bears. I'm going to hold you over. Don't hang up. I'll come back to you after these commercials.
Okay.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to 10 Bears. And you raise a valid point here, of course. Michigan already had a hand recount because of how narrow the race was. A new recount isn't going to change anything unless they're coming in with boxes of forged, fraudulent ballots. But in the end, the recount is not the goal here. What Hillary wants is to tangle up Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania in legal proceedings so that they may not send their electors to the Electoral College on December 19th. That will narrow the elector gap between her and Donald Trump, where only a handful of bribed, threatened, blackmailed electors switching their votes from Trump to Hillary will hand her the White House. And again, the damage to our public image around the world as a nation is incalculable. We're going to be decades living this debacle down.
Well, I feel the same way, but I kind of felt that way after 2000, and they solved it with the electronic voting system and the Help America Vote Act, which I felt simply compounded the problem.
That exactly it did.
And well, and I, in a way, I agree with what Stein is saying. We have questions about the legitimacy and integrity of the machines, but then none of those questions were brought out during the primaries when it looked like it was most prominent, and none of those questions have actually really been vetted by candidates prior to this election since 2000. Kerry didn't complain about it, and I thought he got screwed. And not that I was for him or against him one way or the other, but so all of this coming to a head right now seems odd. And then they're going to go to a place like Michigan where we've done optical scan. We don't use the machines she speaks of. And so the whole thing just smacks of deception, which gets me to my second point, which was what the Washington Post did, which was come out with all these news sites, which you were one of them, that they say, well, this is fake news. And I argue strongly about this particular point because in conjunction with Trump and his news site and all this stuff, they put WikiLeaks on there, which if you've listened, WikiLeaks crows about their integrity and how they'd never have got it wrong. And if that's true, and arguably, if that's true, how in the world could the Post put WikiLeaks on that list?
Well, the Washington Post isolated itself by quoting this other website that's been in existence less than 6 months, actually, called propornot.com. And by the way, there is now a satire site, propornot.org. Don't confuse the two. But this propornot.com simply listed all of the independent media's leading websites and provided absolutely no justification for declaring that there's any link between our sites and Russia, and the Washington Post carried it as unquestioned gospel news. I mean, this doesn't even come up to the normal standards of reporting that the Washington Post claims that they adhere to, which is a confirmation from a second source when they make these claims. But it is a smear job. Again, we're seeing the corruption of our current system on full display for the entire world to see. And you're right. Back in 2000, when people were very angry about how out of control it got, we were promised they would fix the system, and instead they made it worse. They mandated these electronic voting machines, which Bev Harris at Black Box Voting has documented. They're wide open to fraud. They're designed to steal elections and to hide the fact of the theft itself. And if you still haven't seen that HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy, you need to hunt it down. I'm sure it's somewhere on Netflix or Hulu or someplace. You need to watch that. I bought the DVD. I show it to friends and all the time. And it is. Our election system is designed to facilitate election theft and to conceal it because that's what keeps our current regime in power. As Stalin used to say, people who vote decide nothing. People who count the votes decide everything. And we have to bring
wise man.
We have to bring the counting of the votes back to the American people themselves, which is kind of at the core of this proposed change to the election system that I've written about and posted about. And again, once we get through...
One more thing I wanted to say about that, if I could.
Real quick.
Recount that's going on in Wisconsin. If you could maybe make a note on your website about this. I went there today because I had heard articles being shopped around about how Trump gained, thousands, or Hillary lost thousands of votes, in the recount. So I went to their actual site and I did the math myself, and I could not figure out how they're calculating that from their state Board of Canvassers website. So I'll let you go on that note.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We got to let you go and do a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones, I want to get some news out of the way here. As I mentioned to that caller earlier in the show, we've got a forecast for more snow here in Hawaii up on the tops of the volcanoes. They got 2 feet of snow over the weekend from the storm. And what's really interesting is that normally on the Big Island, the snow falls on the sides of the mountains, but not at the very top, because that's 14,000 feet up, and it's actually higher than most of the clouds. But in this case, the snow went right up to the observatories, and they got 2 feet, another foot coming. Now, Lord Monckton, of course, has been out there saying all along that global warming is junk, and he just put up a new article at his website with a graphic, the global warming speedometer, and it's a graph that illustrates just how badly all of the predictions by the global warming enthusiasts, how badly they've missed, how much they over-predicted global warming. And I understand this Wednesday he's got a global warming hoax lecture that he's probably going to share all of this at. Now, Buzz Aldrin, you all remember, was the second man onto the moon, following Neil Armstrong, and he's now got a first in his own name. You probably heard last week that he was down in Antarctica visiting the South Pole as a tourist, and he came down with some kind of a medical condition. His lungs were filling with water. He had to be medevaced. He's doing okay. He's recovering. But they noticed when they were going through the records that Buzz Aldrin is now the oldest person to make it to the South Pole. So now he's got something where he's number one, the oldest man to get to the South Pole. Keep going there, Buzz. And anyway, let's grab some phone calls. Ralph in New York, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Have you been observing the case in South Carolina, the Walter Scott incident?
Yes.
Police officer that shot the black man in the back while he was running.
Yeah, well, I'm following that one in a whole bunch.
They're talking. It's becoming an epidemic all over the country now, where police officers are being attacked by this particular generation now. It's becoming an epidemic. Do you think this generation now is becoming anti-law enforcement, put down because Trump is in office now? You think it'll be any different?
It's got nothing to do with Donald Trump. The American people are responding to decades of gratuitous police brutality, unjustified shootings, unjustified deaths, massive civil forfeiture to the point where the police are stealing more from the American people than all the burglars, muggers, and pickpockets and thieves combined. And so the American people see the police as the enemy. They don't see them as a benefit to the society. Criminals get away with their crimes, and the police seem focused on looting and pillaging the law-abiding American citizens. And so, yeah, there's a backlash, and it's got nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Do you think civil forfeiture will be done away with in the Trump administration, even though with liberals in the inner cities are for it also, or just based on a federal level it'll be done away with?
I think it needs to be refocused, because the original idea was actually
that came in the 80s.
Yeah, the original idea was that
Ronald Reagan was in office.
The civil forfeiture was going to target those who made huge amounts of money off their crime to take their money away from them. But unfortunately, police departments started playing fast and loose with the rules and started using it to loot money from law-abiding citizens. And because they were arresting, if you will, objects rather than people, the normal civil rights and legal protections didn't apply. And you see the courts filling up with these cases of such and such police department against 3 cases of wine. And it became a racket. Again, it was targeting law-abiding Americans who were too poor to fight the court system, and the big criminals were still getting away with what they were doing. It was a badly botched process. I think there's a justification for civil forfeiture if it's applied to real criminals. But these days,
predominantly, right?
Tourists are coming.
Predominantly African Americans are predominantly stopped more than anything, more than anybody else, 10 times more, especially for traffic stops. It's got to a point now where a traffic violation could cost you your life right now. This Walter Scott situation, the guy just ran away from simple factors of a simple traffic violation, and he lost his life. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, there's a big problem with Canada. Canada is now advising their people not to visit the United States of America because of all the Canadians who come through the border, and they're here to have fun, and they get stopped by the police, and their cash gets taken, and they're like stressed just to get back home again, and that's a big problem, and it is totally out of control. And we understand why all of our city, state governments are just as broken in debt as the federal government, and they're turning to pillaging the people just to balance their books and buy lots of goodies and whatnot. And people can be forgiven for viewing our police as no better than Sir Guy of Gisborne's tax collectors running across the countryside stealing pigs and chickens and farmers' daughters whenever they feel like it.
Well, you can blame the Ronald Reagan era for that, all saying that. The civil forfeiture started during the 80s in the Reaganomics era.
Well, I don't think we can blame just Reagan for it. It's obviously been a long process of diverting civil forfeiture from its original intent of stripping the wealth from criminals who made that wealth with crime and turning it into this weapon that is used randomly on individual law-abiding Americans. For people to have any faith in the justice system, they must see the criminals punished directly and the law-abiding innocent protected. And we don't have that anymore. We're seeing the criminals walk free all across our country, the Clintons being first and foremost on that. And innocent law-abiding Americans are being looted and in some cases killed by an out-of-control police force that turns a blind eye to the drug trade and the rest of it. We have a president who's writing pardons and sentence commutations for hundreds and hundreds of cocaine dealers. That tells you just how badly corrupted our entire society has become. It's a repeat of the corruption we saw during Prohibition, where the rum runners and the bootleggers had enough money to buy their way into the highest levels of the U.S. government, and the government basically became a wing of the organized crime syndicates. And we're seeing exactly the same thing today.
Well, I'm pretty sure Obama, before he leaves office, he's going to do his dirty tactics in the next couple of more weeks before he leaves office.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of 11th hour skullduggery going on there.
Exactly. He's going to see all these dirty tactics. I could imagine what he got behind the Oval Office and this to be in his mind before he leaves office.
All right.
All the mischief he got.
Yeah, he will. Anyway, listen, got to let you go here. Got a couple more phone calls.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch to Ed in Michigan. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I hope your weather's better than ours is. We got snow, and it's been actually really kind of cold for this time.
Well, we've had a little bit of rain. Fortunately, most of it has missed us where we are, and Let me just look at the minimum here. Yeah, we're getting temperatures down to the mid-60s here. But most of the snow and everything hit the Big Island and Maui up at the observatory at Haleakala. And we're not going to get snow here on Oahu. We're simply not tall enough to get there. But it is unusually cool. But today it's actually pretty. A few little sprinkles and scattered clouds, and otherwise, though, it's pretty good.
Well, you know, they're starting to find out that there's a lot more undersea volcanoes than they used to think that there was. But I didn't really want to get on that subject. Are you familiar with No Agenda with Mike Dvorak and Adam Curry?
I've heard of them, but I don't know much about them.
Well, they do a value for value, and it's really good. They've been doing it for a long time. You got to check it out. I've been watching it on YouTube. And then one more issue was George Soros being a Hungarian, and if they can get charges brought up on him in this country, would that stop his money from being used over here?
I would like to see that happen. We know that Soros is now, like Henry Kissinger, there are countries he cannot set foot in because there are arrest warrants waiting for him. My problem with Soros is he's one of these ultra-wealthy billionaires who thinks being a billionaire gives him a right to play with planet Earth and the human race like some kind of toy. And I resent that because Soros is not elected to be our government or represent us or rule us, nor would I vote for the guy. Actually, Soros is a huge argument for socialism by showing what individuals with way too much money, what mischief they're able to do. And it's almost an argument in favor of some kind of wealth limiting system where when you reach a certain degree of wealth and comfort, the tax rates go way, way, way up so that you can't acquire enough money to be a threat to the stability of the nation.
And his open society agenda is a failure. It's failed everywhere he's tried to do it. And now the video where he turned his attention towards the United States, I don't know if you've seen that or not, a younger George Soros telling his agenda for the world, and the guy he's got to go.
He's a fanatic. He's an absolute fanatic. And again, he's daydreaming. He's got this fantasy of a utopian society that he wants to bring about. But again, it's all based on that critically flawed foundation of the liberal philosophy, which is you can control what's in the minds of people by controlling the environment around them. It's a fraud. It's based on an intellectual fraud. That's why all of these liberal fantasies never work out, and it leads to all kinds of pain and suffering. Anyway, listen, Ed, need to let you go. We got a bunch more callers before the end of the show here. Gary in Arkansas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I wanted to offer up a solution to Donald Trump's selection of new blood into the government. I think, first off, all dual citizen officials have to go.
I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that.
Israel-American citizenship is crap. Number one. Number two, I would take each agency, I would automatically fire the head of the department and the assistant head. Now, when you get to the FBI and the DOJ, you may have to go down 20 layers to get.
I would agree on the Department of Justice and the FBI, but I'm not going to rule out the possibility that there are some people in the current system that are actually doing a good job, and we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. In fact, there are a couple of current office holders that Trump has indicated he'd like to stay on in their position. And again, Donald Trump's selections are easy to understand if you realize he's not going from ideology, he's looking for competency. He's trying to find the people he's convinced will actually do the job he tells them to do and be able to do it well. And once you look at it from that point of view, most of Donald Trump's picks make a lot of sense. I don't agree with Carson for HUD, but again, that's not up to me.
Yeah, you can't undo about $3,000 or 3,000 years of damage in the first 100 days of office. I understand that, and he could appoint a committee to oversee this replacement thing. There's a lot of good people in government. I'm not anti-government at all. I'm for strong government, but I'm for strong, good, small government. And he could have a committee that could override that automatic rule. But there's just too damn many smart people like you and I and the rest of the listening audience out here in America could do a hell of a lot better job running this country than those scumbags in Washington. So.
Well, that's because those of us out here would probably be desirous of trying to do a good job for the American people and the American nation. We haven't grown up thinking that the world orbits around us and the human race exists just to make us wealthy. Anyway, listen, Gary, I'm going to let you go, and we're going to move to Andy in Texas. Aloha, Andy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, well, Mike, I'm going back to a previous caller on this civil forfeiture and whatnot. You know, I've been arrested a few times for stupid little stuff. First, I shouldn't have never been arrested because the Constitution didn't give them that kind of right. But every time I've ever went to jail and they released me, I'm always missing my money. And one of them did it right in front of me, took my entire paycheck out of my pocket, looked at another cop and said, "Hey, evidence, huh?" And the other guy said, "Yeah," and boom, that was the last I seen of it. When I brought it up in court, we didn't see any $400 or whatever. You know, so, I mean, that's what's going to cause problems in this country is that these people are actually taking a paycheck from the very people that they're accosting and running out here and violating the Constitution on a daily basis. On a daily basis.
Yeah.
So my biggest thing is that if Donald Trump can do anything, well, actually it's two things. Let's get back to the Constitution and what it really says, what it really means. I mean, those rights are our rights. They're not the government giving to us. They're our rights. And then we got to do away with departments like the FDA and the EPA and the BLM and stuff. This is just all wrong. This is not what a free society has.
Well, hang on a minute, okay? If these agencies were doing the jobs we're being told they're supposed to do, that would be okay. But what we're finding out is all these agencies have become just as corrupted as the rest of the government and are actually working as advocacy and enablers for these abusive corporations. I do think we need these agencies, but we need to retask them to their original purpose. What we need to do is sort of bring back a sense of right and wrong to this nation, where we have the freedom to point at police officers who are looting the American people and subject them to public shame. A big part of the problem we have right now is that people can do bad things and then hire some public relations firm to make it all look okay in the corporate media. That has to stop. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program on this Monday. We're going to take one more phone call from Dennis in Florida. Dennis, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I know you pressed for time, but I don't know whether anybody told you this today, so maybe I'll be the first. Happy anniversary to you and Claire and many more.
Well, thank you very much. I've gotten a lot of email of congratulations from all kinds of people, and it is interesting. 22 years. Wow. I mean,
God bless you, pal. All right, listen, I'm going to go. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to go ahead and close the phone lines here. Let me just do something real quick on my system. Okay, now then, as you know, there is still a contentious issue regarding mercury preservatives in vaccines and the continuing controversy over the fact that the CDC rigged its own report to deny a link between vaccinations and autism in order to allow the U.S. vaccine court to deny support payments to the parents of autistic children. And it was just a fake. They cheated these people. They crippled their children, and then they cheated them out of any kind of financial compensation. That's what the system was set up to do. Now, there's been another study done over in Egypt where they're dealing with a skyrocketing autism epidemic, and they have done a study which confirms there is a link between autism and mercury preservatives used in vaccines. And I imagine it has to be an extraordinarily scary thing to be living in a country where you've come to understand you can't trust what is on the supermarket shelves. You can't trust what's in that needle the doctor is sticking into your kid. You can't trust any of it because it's all geared to maximize profits to the corporations, and whether it's good for you or beneficial to you or even harmful is a secondary consideration. I mean, look at the attitude we've been getting out of the software industry, especially Microsoft. You know, you will upgrade to Windows 10 so we can charge you by the month. Doesn't matter that it doesn't work, that it kills your data and everything. We, the corporations, are telling you this is what you will buy. Now, there's another story. This one came out of Express over in Great Britain, basically showing that a study of people on statins, which have been linked to actual harm to the heart, this study is showing that except for people aged over 65, statins have no effect whatsoever on your lifespan. It's another medication that's sold to make money and not necessarily does anything. Now, remember that weird thunderstorm asthma that hit a bunch of people in Australia? It's happened again in Kuwait. This is something brand new, and frankly, I'm questioning that official explanation that the thunderstorm simply kicked up enough dust to put 1,000 people in the hospital. I'm wondering if these storms have hit some store of biological weapons. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. You are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with everyone that you know. Go gentle, one story at a time. Don't overwhelm them. Don't shock them. Don't scare them. Their defense mechanisms will kick on in. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.